there are two small sections that many students often forget. And this is the last section of the methods chapter, which is the chapter called data analysis. It's a bit trivial, but I've often come across proposals where this section was missing. So here in the data analysis chapter, you have to explain in a concise manner, of course, how you plan to analyze the data that you acquired in terms of the classical statistical approaches, but also in view of answering your research question and verifying or falsifying your hypotheses.
So if applicable to your research topic, you may also conceptualize a model, for example, on how income shapes human-animal relationships, or how climate change will affect yield of African eggplant as means of providing insight into your irrigation experiment. If you plan to do such things, do specify them in this section. It will definitely distinguish your proposal from others.
Exactly, that is very important, that your proposal stands out. After the data analysis chapter and the short chapter you just mentioned, there is another very short section that is entitled Expected Outcomes of the Thesis. And in this, you have to summarize the major results of your study and explain how you will present them to the scientific public by giving, for example, the working titles of your 3 planned journal papers or the 2 book chapters according to your disciplinary conventions. And furthermore, I think you should make also reference to the conferences that you plan to visit, because they may be in your budget, and at which, of course, you would like to present your results. And if you plan to always update your followers, the scientific community, and your donor about your research steps on Twitter or Instagram, that would also be nice to put the link here and to make it very clear that you are also conveying your messages to a broader public and not just the scientific audience.
So actually there are quite a few things that one should keep in mind. There's also something else that I think of. So there should be also another chapter entitled Institutional Setting. So here you explain to the donor who your host organization and your supervisor will be, what their support to you as a PhD student will be, and how they will facilitate your research. For example, by granting free access to their laboratory or to a fully fledged office, which is a dream of every PhD student. Of course, you can only write this chapter once you have found a principal supervisor and received his or her commitment to host you.
Yes, that is very important. I'll come back to that in a minute. But let's first talk about the research proposal. So you have still 2 more chapters to put in, and there you just copy and paste your Excel spreadsheets, namely the table of activities, which is your timetable, and then the chapter requested funds, where you insert your budget table. And preferably you do that by copying the spreadsheets and then pasting it or them into the Word file as an image, so that the formatting doesn't change anymore. And when you are doing that, it's of course clear that already in your Excel spreadsheets you choose a very nice layout for these tables, and you're not just having sort of a very draft and messy table, because that one you cannot put into your proposal.
So now it seems that the job is almost done, but there is also a very important nitty-gritty aspect, and this is actually to follow the donor's guidelines on the length and the format of the proposal. So one should make sure that one is strictly following the rules concerning page margins, line spacing, font type, font size, and so on and so on. So this also applies to all other documents that the donor requests. If the donor wants my application to be in one single PDF file, please submit it in that form. Any application that's not in accordance with the donor's rules can be discarded immediately, since many of them actually receives hundreds of applications, And if your application is not fulfilling this basic requirement of following the technical guidelines, you might be very quickly ending up in the bin.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And so if your proposal text is too long, reduce the word count, but also be sure that you only remove the superfluous wording and leave the essential parts. Sometimes a lengthy text passage can be replaced with a diagram, especially when it comes to the depiction of an experimental design or of a conceptual model. And perhaps a diagram or a picture makes sense in your case of proposal. So such an unconventional element also makes your proposal stand out from others.
Okay, so once the proposal fulfills the scientific criteria and also the formal criteria, does this mean that the job is done?
Not yet, because in most cases the donors ask for 250 to 300 word long abstract, which has to be inserted after the title, the applicant's name and her or his address, and then writing this abstract at the very end of the whole proposal writing process should, however, be a very easy task, because by that time the applicant is really familiar with the text and with the contents of the research, and so writing this short paragraph is really done very quickly. Moreover, it's time now to finally decide on your thesis title. That should be an attractive title, it should be meaningful, scientifically sound, maybe sexy, but not only sexy. So title length should not exceed 2 lines of text, and of course you shouldn't plagiarize someone else's thesis title. For example, if there is already a study entitled Irrigation Effects on Strawberry Yields in Women's Market Gardens, then the title of your thesis, Irrigation Effects on African Eggplant Yields in Women's Market Gardens, is boring. You could instead say, Effects of Judicious Irrigation on Women's Marketable Yield of African Eggplant.
Aha, okay. So the stereotype about science being boring is actually not true. It seems that you have to be creative until the end of the proposal writing process.
Well, in fact, you have to be creative throughout your scientific career. But as you have also seen now, to write a promising PhD proposal is quite a time-consuming process. Therefore, my advice is that you start with this job at least 4 months before the donor organization's deadline, and make sure that at least 2 months before the deadline you establish a first contact with your potential supervisor in case you do not know that person yet. You have identified a host, but you have never contacted him or her, so do that with enough time to get to know each other. And being a professor, I can tell you that supervisors will be much more inclined to accept you as a PhD student if you send them a well-elaborated proposal with a realistic budget and time frame. What supervisors do not like are unspecific research ideas, overly expensive study concepts and unclear funding, and also contact letters that read as if they have been sent out to 10 people at a time. We've now covered all relevant aspects of proposal writing, and I'll just summarize the key points on a final slide.
Thank you so much, Eva. Let's hope that what we've discussed today will inspire our viewers and students to submit successful grant proposals.